Brother invited me to his housewarming to publicly announce that I was no longer welcome in the family. "You've been a disgrace for years," he said into the mic. Everyone cheered. "Well," I replied, sipping my drink, "I guess you'll be needing a new job." His face dropped. "Because I just bought the company you work for." My brother, Daniel, always had a flair for the dramatic. Even as kids, he had to be the center of attention, the golden boy, the one everyone adored. I, on the other hand, was the shadow, the quiet one, the disappointment. At least, that's how my family saw me. So when he sent me an invitation to his housewarming party, I was surprised. We hadn't spoken in years, not since our parents made it clear that, in their eyes, I was nothing but a failure, a disgrace. Still, I went. Maybe a part of me was still that stupid kid hoping for acceptance. Or maybe I just want to see how far he'd fallen into his own ego. Daniel's new house was a statement. Glass walls, polished marble floors, chandeliers that probably cost more than my apartment. It wasn't just a house. It was a kingdom. And he was the self-proclaimed king. The moment I walked in, conversations dropped to whispers. Eyes flickered toward me, some filled with pity, others with amusement. I didn't belong here, and they all knew it. I made my way to the bar, grabbing a drink to steady myself. That's when a microphone screeched. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel's voice rang out. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this new chapter in my life. But before we continue, there's something that needs to be addressed." A pause. A heavy silence. Some of you might have noticed a certain guest here tonight. My dear sibling. His voice dripped with mockery. My stomach tightened. I should have left. I should have seen this coming. "For years," he continued, pacing the stage, "we've all had to endure their failures, their shameful choices." He smiled, a predator baring its teeth. "But tonight, I'm making it official. From this moment on, my family will no longer recognize them as one of us." The crowd erupted in applause. Cheers. Laughter. My own parents nodded in approval. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the burn ground me. Then I smiled. "Well," I said, setting my glass down, "I guess you'll be needing a new job." The room went silent. Daniel's smug expression faltered. "What?" I pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and turned the screen toward him. "I just bought the company you work for." His face lost all color. The audience gasped. Whispers turned into murmurs. Then silence. I took a step forward, lowering my voice just enough for only him to hear. "You wanted to erase me?" I leaned in. "Big mistake." Daniel's eyes darted to my phone screen, scanning the confirmation email with the company's logo stamped at the top. The silence in the room stretched, thick with disbelief. Then his jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." I shrugged. "Am I?" His fingers twitched at his sides, a telltale sign that he was barely holding himself together. The great Daniel, the golden boy, the family's pride, brought to his knees with just a few well-placed signatures. My mother's voice cut through the tension. "What kind of stunt is this?" She looked at me with thinly veiled disgust, like I was something she had scraped off her shoe. "This is exactly why you don't belong here. Always so desperate for attention." I laughed under my breath. "Oh, I'm not desperate. I just want to see his face when he realized he wasn't untouchable." Daniel finally snapped. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "We need to talk. Now." I let him drag me through the murmuring crowd and into an empty hallway. The second the door shut behind us, his mask cracked. "What the hell did you do?" he hissed. I leaned against the wall, enjoying the rare sight of him unraveling. "I bought the company you work for. It wasn't hard. Your boss, well, my boss now, was eager to sell when I made the right offer." His breath came in sharp bursts. "That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money." I smirked. "You never paid attention to anything I did you? Too busy shining in the family spotlight while I was out building something real." Daniel's eyes darkened. He wasn't just angry. He was scared. I stepped closer. "Here's how this is going to work," I said, lowering my voice. "Starting Monday, I'll be in charge, which means I decide who stays, who gets promoted, and who gets fired. I let that last word hang between us." His face twitched. "You wouldn't," I tilted my head. "Try me." A beat of silence. Then he scoffed. "Fine. Fire me. Let's see how long it takes before the board forces you to bring me back." I chuckled, shaking my head. "You really think you're that valuable?" His confidence wavered just for a second. "I did my homework, Daniel. You're not the genius you pretend to be. You've been skating by on borrowed ideas and connections. I have proof." I pulled another email up on my phone. Plagiarized reports. Falsified sales numbers. A few misplaced funds. Should I keep going? His breath hitched. I had him. "Here's what's really going to happen," I continued. "You're going to resign. Gracefully. You'll tell everyone it was your choice. A new opportunity. Maybe something bigger and better. Whatever lie helps you sleep at night." I let my voice drop. "And if you don't, well, I wonder how prison food tastes." His hands curled into fists. For the first time in his life, Daniel had no control. I turned toward the door. "Enjoy the party, brother." And with that, I walked back into the crowd, leaving him alone in the dark. I walked back into the party like nothing had happened. The music played, the drinks flowed, and the guests tried to pretend they hadn't just witnessed the most hum-lighting moment of Daniel's life. But I could feel it, the shift. People whispered behind their glasses, stole glances in my direction. The same people who had laughed along with Daniel minutes ago were now watching me with something else in their eyes. Wariness, curiosity, fear. I took another sip of my drink, letting the moment settle. Then Daniel walked back in. His tie was loose. His face was paler than before. But he was Daniel. He knew how to mask weakness. He forced a grin, clapped a hand on the nearest guest's shoulder, and pretended nothing had changed. But I saw it. The tiny tremor in his fingers. The stiffness in his stride. He was unraveling. And then I saw her. Isabel, Daniel's fiancée. The woman he paraded around like a trophy. She stood near the bar, watching me with sharp eyes, her lips pressed together in thought. Unlike everyone else, she didn't look amused. Or afraid. She looked intrigued. Interesting. I set my glass down and made my way over. She didn't move as I approached, just lifted her glass to her lips and took a slow sip. "You're enjoying this," she said before I even opened my mouth. I smiled. "Aren't you?" Her lips twitched. She didn't answer. We stood there for a moment, the party buzzing around us, but in that space between us, there was something unspoken. Something she wasn't saying. So I said it to her. "You knew, didn't you?" I murmured. That he wasn't as untouchable as he liked to pretend. She exhaled a quiet laugh, swirling the wine in her glass. "Let's just say, I don't believe in fairy tales." I leaned against the bar, studying her. Isabel had always been the perfect partner for Daniel. Beautiful, poised, and just ruthless enough to fit into his world. But now I wasn't so sure. Maybe she wasn't just fitting into his world. Maybe she was looking for a way out. Before I could say anything else, a voice cut through the crowd. Daniel's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, forcing another grin. "Let's not let one unpleasant guest ruin the night." Ah, there it was. His counterattack. I turned back to Isabel, but her expression had closed off. Whatever moment had passed between us was gone. She gave me a small, unreadable smile and stepped away, disappearing into the crowd. I faced the room just as Daniel lifted his glass. "Tonight, we celebrate not just my new home, but the future." His gaze locked onto mine. A future where some people are nothing more than a bad memory. The crowd chuckled. Weakly. Uneasy. I smiled. "To the future, then." I lifted my glass and drank. Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought he could still win. That he could bury this moment under charm and arrogance. But I knew something he didn't. This wasn't just a battle. It was a war. And I was just getting started. Daniel kept his smile, but I could see the cracks forming. The way his fingers clenched around his glass. The way his eyes flickered to me, then away, like looking for too long would make his loss more real. He wasn't done fighting. Fine. Neither was I. The party continued, but the energy had shifted. The laughter was forced, the conversation strained. No one wanted to be caught standing too close to me or too close to Daniel. The balance of power was tilting, and they all felt it. I stepped away from the crowd, weaving through the towering sculptures and expensive decor. This house was meant to be Daniel's monument to success. Now it felt like a castle built on sand. Then I heard voices. Low, tense. I slowed my pace, stopping just before the open doors of Daniel's study. "You didn't tell me about this." Isabel's voice. Cold, controlled. "I didn't think it mattered," Daniel snapped back. A pause, then a quiet laugh, one that sent a shiver down my spine. Isabel wasn't just angry. She was amused. "Oh, Daniel," she sighed. "You always think you're the smartest person in the room." I leaned in slightly, careful to stay hidden. "What do you want me to say?" he hissed. Did I underestimate them? That I should have made sure they stayed down years ago? I clenched my jaw. Them. Not me. Not his sibling. Just an obstacle. "I want you," Isabel said slowly, "to start thinking ahead." Silence. Then, the sound of glasses clinking. "How bad is it?" she asked. Daniel exhaled sharply. "If they really own the company, bad." "And the other thing?" Isabel pressed. A pause. Then handle. I didn't like the way he said it. I stepped back, my mind already spinning. Daniel had always been ruthless, but this wasn't just about his job anymore. There was something bigger beneath the surface, and I was going to find out what. I turned and slipped away before they could notice. The party was still in full swing, but I barely noticed the faces around me. I needed to think, needed a plan. Then my phone buzzed. A single text. "Unknown number. You need to see this." An address followed. Why I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen. Coincidence? No, not tonight. I glanced back toward the study, where Daniel and Isabel were still locked in quiet conversation. If there was a move to make, this was it. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside. The party was still in full swing behind me, but it felt like a distant hum. My focus was locked on the address glowing on my phone screen. I didn't recognize it, but someone wanted me to. Sliding into my car, I entered the location into GPS. A warehouse, on the outskirts of the city. Daniel always kept secrets. I had a feeling this was one he never wanted me to find. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, abandoned except for a single light flickering near the entrance. My tires crunched against gravel as I pulled up and killed the engine. For a second, I hesitated. A setup? Maybe. But at this point, there was no turning back. I stepped out. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air smelled like dust and oil, the kind of place where forgotten things go to die. My footsteps echoed as I moved forward, eyes scanning the shadows. Then I saw it. A desk, a laptop, and a thick manila folder sitting in the center. The laptop screen was already on, a video paused at the very first frame. A shaky recording. Someone's hand hovering over a keyboard. I pressed play, and my blood turned to ice. It was a video of Daniel, sitting in an office, his office, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Their voices were low, serious. "You understand what's at stake?" the man asked. Daniel leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "I don't care how it happens. Just make sure they take the fall." My stomach twisted. The video jumped, skipping forward in time. Now, Daniel was standing, pacing. The man shook his head. "If this goes wrong, there's no coming back from it." Daniel laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. "That's the point." The video ended. I exhaled, staring at the black screen, my heart pounding. The folder. I snatched it up and flipped it open. Documents. Emails. Bank transactions. Evidence. Proof that Daniel had been orchestrating something far worse than just trying to cut me out of the family. He had tried to ruin me. Completely. I ran a hand through my hair, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. A noise. Footsteps outside. I shut the folder, grabbed the laptop, and moved fast. By the time I slipped out the back door, a car was pulling up to the front. Headlights washed over the entrance. Daniel. I didn't stick around to see what he'd do. I had what I needed. And for the first time in years, I had the upper hand. This war wasn't over. But Daniel had just lost his biggest weapon. And he didn't even know it yet.